Story number 1. The Ghost Twin of My Mom. Even though this story happened a long time ago, if you know me, I've probably told it to you at least once. That means you probably also know my little brother. He knows the story I'm about to tell you because he lived it with me. If you asked him, he'd tell you the same story. I'm sure he remembers it the same way I do, and it's a memory we can't really get rid of. We were living in a small house with 2 or 3 bedrooms at the time. We lived in a house with an upstairs and a downstairs. It was for my mom, my little brother, and my sister. My little brother had his own room, while my sister and I shared a room. My mom didn't sleep on the same floor as us, though, because her room was downstairs. This is important because we couldn't sleep in her room because we were scared at night. In this picture, I'm in the late elementary school years, 7 to 8 years old, and my siblings are a year or 2 younger than me, 6 to 7 years old. As you can guess, the dark and our imaginations would scare us a lot before bed. You should expect to have these silly fears at this age, but the fact that our house was a little off at night didn't help. Even though my mom joked that it was her ghost boyfriend, Jerry, I think she really meant it. She didn't want to give us more reason to be scared. At night, our house was really strange. Strange sounds would come from nowhere, like heavy footsteps that didn't belong to anyone walking around the house at night and making the floorboards creak. At times, they would stomp around in certain rooms of the house, asking to be noticed. It was not our voices that could be heard in the halls. The voices were clear but not very clear, like quiet cries or simple weeps or calls to anyone who was listening. Things would go missing and reappeared in the house. Whatever lived there was really weird, and I swear they liked to bother me and my brothers. When we lived there, I never really thought about it, but now that I think about it, I feel uneasy because it wasn't normal. It seemed like any other night when it was time for bed, but I was in my brother's room with him and my sister because one of them said they were feeling uneasy, so my sister and I chose to sleep over in my brother's room. This only made it easier for us to get to bed. It was especially helpful that his bedroom window let light from the street into his room, making it a little easier to see in the dark. Our room, on the other hand, was darker, and there was a big closet in there which didn't help. I slept the farthest away and the closest to the edge of the bed. When I woke up, the bed was rocking a little. The bed for my brother was on a loft bunk. You could sit up under it because it was high enough and had enough room underneath. Only thing was that there were piles of dirty clothes under it, making it impossible to crawl or move around. Since I was only half awake, my eyes wandered around the room. I followed the lights reflected off the wall into the hallway where my brother's door hung. I saw it at that time, the dark figure, the silhouetted figure that looked like my mom. As you might expect, my younger self's breathing got shallow and my eyes got really big. This possible threat caught my attention more, and in the loud silence, I had a mini heart attack. For some reason, I shook my brother. The two of them were very close to me, and I didn't want to take my eyes off of what I was seeing to see if this was real. I kept shaking him, and after the first few shakes, I wouldn't let him fall back to sleep. I felt instantly better when I heard him wake up. Something about him being awake told me I wasn't dreaming anymore and I wasn't the only one going through this. A reason to be brave. When he sat up, I cleared my throat and asked, "Do you see that at all?" I showed him and told him what I was seeing while he tried to figure it out. There was so little light that I couldn't tell if what I saw was real or not. It looked most like an outline, which is the best way to describe it. It didn't have a face or clothes on, but it had a dark glow that made its skin and body hard to see. Its hair, which looked like our mother's, were the only things that seemed real. It was all the same length and curly, and it laid pretty much the same way my mom's hair did. Kept staring at us in silence, still and creepy, playing on our fears. It was very scary how it sat in the hall, hiding right next to the door and peering into the room at us. Because it was so dark, the only thing that helped us tell it was there were the hairs that were still visible. It stayed still and silent while we talked nonsense and made weak efforts to scare it away. My brother saw it and thought the same thing I did. He started calling out to it, thinking it was our mother. "Mommy, we see you, we know that's you, Mommy." Now that I think about it, it scares me that we even thought it was our mom since it looked so much like her, and we were just scared. The fact that it knew it looked like her and imitated her is what scares me the most. I thought it was my mom because she might have wanted us to go to bed, so she scared us, but I hadn't thought about that when I woke up. At that moment, my brother and I laid down to show her we were going to bed, hoping she would walk away, move, or say something to prove it was really her. Especially if we assume she was giving her kids that one look that moms give to get them to behave. The figure finally moved when I looked away for a split second. It was sudden and quick. It came at us quickly and hid under the bed. My brother and I looked at each other, sure that this was our mom and that she was playing a strange game with us. When we got up from the jumpstart, we looked under the bed but only saw the clothes that had been there before. It looked like it had not been touched and was still. We saw the clothes piles instead of our mom. Seeing this made my heart sink right away. I thought, whatever it was is gone. But it's right under us. My brother was scared too, because he hid under his blanket and moved away from the edge of the bed. I did the same thing to make sure my brothers were safe while my sister slept next to us. I still don't know what I saw or heard, but this ghost or other being has been on my mind a lot since then. After that, I don't know how we slept, but we did. We didn't talk about it until a few years later because it was so scary. When we told our mom about it after moving out, she laughed nervously because she had never heard of it happening before, but also said she had never done anything like that to us. In the end, it was a strange house. I have more stories about strange things that happened there, but they were all a little less scary. Could you tell me if something similar has happened to you or if we know what to call this? Story number 2. It wakes me up at night, but my dog died 2 months ago. I remember when it all began. The dreams, the sweating, the scratching, and everything else. Things kept happening to me every night. I didn't understand why they were happening to me or what I did to earn them. Paulo, my dog, died about a month ago, and it almost broke me. It might seem too much, but he was my only family member and best friend. My mom died 12 years before I got him, and my dad soon after. Life had been hard, and I needed someone to help me deal with all the feelings that were going through my body. That's when Apollo came into my life. He was a gift, an angel, and most of all, someone who would listen to me. As my best friend, he always seemed to listen to everything I had to say. I never blamed him. He came with me everywhere, and I gave him everything in exchange for listening to me. But no matter how much I gave, nothing could take more than my life. It's true what they say. The more you enjoy the good things in life, the more they enjoy seeing you hurt as they take away the things you value most. Going into the living room and seeing Apollo's body might have been one of the worst things you could have seen. After crying for a long time, I finally got a shovel and buried him in my garden. Each hole I made in the ground hurt, but not as much as covering his limp body until there was nothing but earth below me. It took me about a week to get back to a somewhat normal life, but taking care of my parents and dog was hard. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was carrying a heavy load of pain and fear. The world lost its color, and my soul died. I was done. As an average person, I could still do things, but it got harder and slower every morning. About once every other night, I would dream that my parents were watching me play with Apollo. I had a big smile on my face because I was in heaven. For a moment, I was sure it was all real, but then I would wake up. Every time I went to sleep, I dreamed I was in heaven, and every time I woke up, I had a terrible nightmare. When I woke up, I thought I could hear my parents laughing and Apollo barking. But then there was quiet. I didn't notice that the quiet was breaking until a month after these dreams. The next night, after the dreams, I woke up and checked the time. It was about 3:30 a.m. It was hard to see where I was because my eyes were blurry from being so solid. The hum of the fan above me helped me remember where I was. In the dark, empty room of my bedroom, I felt alone and thought about the made-up stories I was living in my head. When I looked around my room, all I saw was darkness. I laid my head back on my pillow and hoped to remember what I had been taken away from. I was getting used to the night's quiet when I heard something that cut through it like a boat cutting through the waves. A weak chuff came from what sounded like my hallway. It was hard to hear because the door was shut, but I was sure I heard it. When I heard the noise again, I quickly opened my eyes and stood still. It had been a minute when I heard the soft rustling of something moving down the hallway toward the door. It was slow, but it sounded like it was moving slowly. The sound of something tapping on the wooden floor, which sounded like an animal's nail, could be heard in my room. When I heard a chuff again, this time to the left frame of the door, I paid close attention. The sound was exactly like a dog, but how could a dog get into my house? The dog door I bought was set up so that Apollo was the only one who could open it. The door would open because of a chip in his collar, but I left the collar with him in the grave. As I waited for another sound to come from the other side of the door, my mind was full of ideas. I never went to sleep, and my thoughts kept me going all day, like coffee. It felt like a dream, and I knew I would wake up soon. But I was wide awake, and most importantly, I wasn't by myself. I stayed awake for hours until I could see a few rays of sun coming through my blinds. While my feet were on the floor next to my bed, I chose to get out of bed and get ready. I was less worried as the night went on because no one else was making any noise. Still, I tried to be realistic even though I couldn't fall asleep. This wasn't the first time I had heard sounds coming from my head. Every time I woke up, I heard what sounded like Apollo and my parents. This time was no different. Before I could even get out of bed and walk to the door, I stopped in my tracks out of fear. After about 2 steps, I heard a loud yelp and then a lot of running down my hallway. What the hell I had heard was there the whole night. It felt like my body was on fire because I could feel my blood moving quickly through it. I was so shocked that I didn't dare move for what seemed like an hour. What kind of animal would have stayed in one place all night and done who knows what? I finally got the nerve to open my door and see an empty hallway. As I started to walk down, I stepped in a wet puddle. I took a step back and looked at what looked like enough spit to fill a water bottle. I had every reason to believe that a dog had gotten in and was lost, but I just couldn't see how that was possible. To get more information, I went further down the path. Everything was fine. It was important to check everything more than once to make sure nothing was missing. The dog door looked the same as it had always done. I wanted to say it was all in my head, but the slobber was real. I thought that getting through the day would help me get through the night. Who knows, maybe whatever it was had just gotten lost and was now back home. Like every other day, things went as planned, and I slowly forgot what happened last night. When I thought about my family, it always took my mind off of things. Once it got dark, I turned off the TV and made sure everything was locked. After I was happy, I did what I always do at night, and before I knew it, I was sound asleep. It must have been hours before I jumped out of bed when I heard the sound of a howl. A deep howl that made my body shake for at least 3 seconds. In an instant, the day that had been normal turned back into the nightmare I had the night before. I quickly looked at the door because I had a scary realization. It was still open. My mental state was bad because I was tired from the day and hadn't gotten enough sleep. I passed out before I could close the door to my room. I woke up looking at the crack that kept me safe from whatever was in my house. I could feel the arms that were holding me up start to shake like the roots of a building shaking during an earthquake. Seconds went by that felt like hours. Even though I felt heavy at first, I knew that any sound or movement could bring whatever howled closer. The night before, I heard something scuffling around in the living room, and I sometimes heard a chuff. I could hear the table in the middle of the living room being pushed around while cups shook on top of it. It was very loud. It howled again with the same level of energy, stopped, and then started walking again. I barely got the strength to stand up, and I carefully crept to the door. I got to the door frame and was too scared to look around. I had to get this thing out of my house. It looked like it might have been a dog, so I had to be careful, especially if it was a stray or a bigger dog that could hurt me. My heart was beating fast as I slowly looked around the frame to see the dark hallway that went to the living room, which was only slightly lit. Since the thing was moving, the table was now at an angle and the carpet looked like it had been moved around. I walked slowly down the hall with a chill going down my spine. On the right side of the room, I could hear a faint drawing. As soon as I got 4 feet from where the hallway led to the living room, I could smell something so bad that it made me gag. It smelled like rotten meat, vomit, and feces mixed together to make a horrible scent. I had to stand against the wall for a second to take in the strong smells before the dog dish beeped and brought my attention back to the room in front of me. I remembered a lot of things because I hadn't heard that sound in the 2 months that Apollo hadn't been here. When the worker at the pet store told me that the chip in his collar could open the dog door and the food container when needed, I was very interested in how it worked. Then I realized the truth. How could that thing have that chip? There was only one possible explanation. Apollo dug himself out of the grave and crawled back into the house for one last visit. This didn't happen, but it was the only one that could have happened. The collar could have been dug up by this thing, but no animal would be smart enough to know how it worked. Sure enough, I heard the dog eating after hearing 4 limbs scuffling against the wooden floor. Even more questions were running through my mind as I continued my trip. Suddenly, I heard an animal. It was coming from the ground. The food stopped moving, and the house was once again very quiet. Then a shadow moved slowly toward the hallway entrance and stopped just before it could be seen. I stood there, scared and interested, hoping that if it looked down, it wouldn't be able to see what I was doing. The shadow stayed there for a while and then moved forward again. I could hear the animal breathing softly on the other side of the wall. I could see the end of a dog's nose coming out of the darkness as I heard it sniff. When I slowly leaned forward to get a better look, it loudly ran to the dog door in the next second. I started to run to the hole, but the doggy door closed behind the intruder before I could get there. I rushed to the door and opened it, but all that was there was a cold breeze. When I went back to look for any hints, I saw that a lot of food had been eaten and that the dog's scent was still slightly present where it had been. When I went into the kitchen to look around, I saw a pile of hot poop in the middle of the floor. When I went to get some things to clean it up because I couldn't stand what I saw, I noticed something strange. It was too big for a dog to poop in. Apollo was a big dog, and I had to clean up after him for 12 years. But this was different. I thought it was a dog because of what I had heard, but the human-sized poop scared and confused me. Since it was already very late, I chose to ignore the strange sight and clean up. I then made sure everything was locked and went back to bed. This time, I made sure to block the dog door with a clothes box so that whatever it was could not get in again. Even though it was hard to sleep that night, I was able to get a little rest thanks to the box, which kept me and the dog outside safe. Over the next few days, I tried to figure out what had happened the night before strange events. How could Apollo be back? Was it really him, or did someone or something get in? But I knew it wasn't going to happen. It might have been the strong desire to see my best friend again. That floor had his dead body on it. I threw dirt on the dog I used to play with, and I watched as the cold earth covered my best friend's foggy eyes. I asked myself the same questions all day, and the nights made things even more confusing. I would close my door before going to sleep because I was afraid that the stranger would come back and visit. It took me a while to fall asleep. I would wake up with a single creak, and I swear I could hear it in my house. In the mornings, I would sometimes see that the box was slightly moved forward, as if something was trying to get in or had pushed it back into place to make it look normal. It never made sense to me that it could be in my house while I slept. Things slowly started to look like they did before, and the dreams started to come back with the same wake-up fear. I wish things were still that way. It was kind of nice to get back to my normal schedule. It brought me joy that I hadn't felt in a long time. When I got home, I sat down on my couch to relax before it got dark. Having a little extra happiness, I chose to make my favorite food and watch my favorite movie. It was the best day I had had since seeing Apollo. When I went to wash the dishes after dinner, I looked out at the garden and thought about how my friend must be there, relaxing and hopefully at peace. I never went back there because it made me sad. But maybe I should start seeing it as a happy reflection of the good memories I've made lately instead of the bad ones. Since we got a dog, going outside at night has been really scary for me. It was cold outside. I went to the light switch and turned on the outside lights to see the grave and maybe feel better about the end of the day. When I saw a small pile of dirt next to the grave, my eyes were still getting used to how dark it was. I was filled with pure fear, and I did my best to understand. It was hot as I ran out the back door and to the grave. It was the grave of a woman who used to be a fee, now full of earthworms in the place where Apollo used to be. I had to have been having a bad dream, a long, detailed one that I made up in my crazy head. My nose caught the sweat that was running from my forehead to my lips. Is Apollo still alive? Was he some kind of ghost that was following me? There were no shovel marks on the pile of dirt next to the grave. Instead, there were marks of paws or hands. Because I didn't know when it was done, I wish I had just looked out sooner. Whatever was in my house was either a crazy version of Apollo or something that dug up his body. No matter what, I was scared. After looking everywhere, the most heartbreaking thing was that there was no sign of Apollo's body anywhere. I ran back to my house and slammed the door shut. I was painting and sweating, and my mind was full of all kinds of thoughts. What I thought was my dog was actually something else, and it was in my house with me. From what I knew, it had been coming in when I wasn't even aware of it. As I stood there, I couldn't even think about going to sleep. I wondered how anything that had happened could be real. When I heard a whimper, my blood froze. I stopped moving when I heard the quiet whimper of a dog or something that sounded like a dog far away. The moment I slowly turned my head to look at the hallway, I saw half of a face looking back at me. I knew he was on all fours because of how tall he was. He was hiding behind the wall, so I could only see half of his face. He had what I thought was Apollo's skull on his head, but it was still stuck together with bits of his dead skin. The man looked at me with a frown and a whimpering sound. His eyes could see through all the skin because the sockets were empty. There were flies all around him, and the smell slowly made its way to me. It was just as bad as the night before. When he saw the disgusted and horrified look on my face, he ran quickly into the hall, hitting the floor with his knees and hands. It made my heart race, and my knees hurt because I had to hold on to the counter. This man had been at my door and in my house acting like my dog, and he messed up the grave of my dog. The thought of a man rolling around on my floor in my dog's dead skin and running through my house just 10 feet away made me want to throw up. I had no idea what kind of crazy game this man was playing or what kind of state of mind he was in, but my body wouldn't move. He got this tag, which led him right into my house. He behaved as if he were my dog and only friend, and he got sick pleasure from it. The sound of scratching could be heard in the kitchen, and I rushed to the doorframe as if I had just learned how to walk. When I got to the doorframe, I saw the man's bent shape scratching at my door. He was on his knees, clawing at the door to my bedroom drawing. Sticky drool was coming out of his mouth and making a puddle on the floor. I could see that the collar around his neck was too tight and made his veins stand out. He had hair all over his body and was dirty. He was naked, and the dead tail of Apollo was attached to his back near his rear end. He had feces stuck in his hair, and all of his nails were very long. I had never seen anything so gross in my life, and I had to fight hard not to throw up on the floor in front of me. He looked at him for a moment and then turned around and barked at me. He began to shake his behind to make it look like the tail that was stuck on him was moving, but he just stared at me the whole time. There he was, a person with dog-like features. I had never seen anyone like him before. When you looked at him, it was hard to remember that he was a grown man acting like a dog. There was no way to know how long he had been watching me for. He might have been here for weeks. I told him to leave my house and ran him outside. But it wasn't a dog. He was a grown man who could hurt me, so I had to find a way to stay safe. I didn't have a gun, and the closest thing I had to a gun was a kitchen knife, but I couldn't take my eyes off of him. What would he do now that I saw him? Such a pure look on his face, it made me think of how Apollo used to look at me. I did the same thing as the man. I just stared at him, waiting. I only had one idea for what to do next. Run to the kitchen and get the knife. What the man did would determine what I did next. The only problem is that he could easily beat me up if I went up to him in the hallway, so I would have to confuse him. I forced myself to swallow my disgust and decide that the only thing that could be done was to join in with his little game. I whistled at him and asked, "Hey buddy, are you lost?" A man at the end of the hallway tilted his head in interest and replied with a deep bark that sounded so real it made my blood run cold. As I looked around, I saw an old bone that belonged to Apollo. I quickly picked it up and showed it to him. "Okay, guys, I understand that you're scared, but let's play now. Come on." I tapped my knees to tell him to come, and he slowly crawled down the hallway to me. I kept whistling and waving the bone at him while slowly moving back to stay out of his reach. I was scared as I watched the man get closer. The sound of his heavy breathing got louder with each hit of his knees on the wooden floor. Now that I was only a few feet away, I threw the bone, and he quickly shuffled over to get it. I ran to the kitchen right away and grabbed a knife. In the background, I could hear the man laughing as he tried to pick up the bone with his teeth. As soon as I took the knife off the counter, I ran back into the living room and saw him facing away from me. His hairy back and tail were the only things I could see. His skin was bleeding from where the staple had gone through it. I grabbed the knife right away and slammed it into his back with all the force I could muster. He threw down the bone with a loud yelp and crawled to the dog door. Again, I ran up to him and stuck the knife several times into his skin. Blood started to splash and leak from his dirty body. While he tried to crawl out the door, I kept stabbing him over and over. Only energy moved through my body. I turned him over and started stabbing him in the chest and guts with all my strength to make sure it was over for good. All of those scary nights came back to me and made me angry, which made me push harder into each stab. His eyes used to be innocent, but now they were filled with fear and the knowledge that he was going to die. I finally stopped and stood up to look at him while he lay there shaking and gasping for air because so much blood was getting into his lungs. "Who the hell are you?" I asked, staring into his scared eyes. "Your best friend." "I meant to be a good boy," he said. When I turned around to face him again, I clenched my teeth and said, "My best friend is dead, and you sure as hell are not him." In less than a second, I sunk the knife deep into his chest until the only sound in the room was my breathing. The bad dream was over. When I called the cops, they were just as confused as I was. We looked at the body of the man who used to sit at my door and wait for some sick prize. They asked the same questions I couldn't answer. I still don't know why he did that or how long he was there. After everything, the dreams didn't end. I still think about my best friend every other night, and I miss him. It is hard to live without Apollo and my parents. I would give anything to see them again. What I saw in real life these past few days makes me wish those dreams could come true. But for now, I'll stick with the dreams. Story number 3. The most scary phone call I've ever had. So it was around 12 to 1 p.m., and during that time I got around 2 scam calls. Obviously I declined them both. But then when it got to the third one, I answered ready to crash out on who kept calling me, but as soon as I said, "Hello," I started hearing a woman's cries. I responded, "Are you okay?" And keep in mind, I do not know the person, but I also couldn't help but notice how it sounded like someone I knew. But I couldn't pinpoint it since they sobbed and sobbed, before they finally responded, "Pick me up," over and over. And by now I'm just wondering if they knew they were calling the wrong number. And I responded, "Who are you?" Before they responded quite quickly, "You know who I am, please pick me up," and I was worried ASF, and if I'm being honest, the number looked oddly like it could be from a school, but I doubt it. And then I said, "I think you have the wrong number," and they said, "No, please just pick me up," and I was about to decline, but I was already uncomfortable and had a gut feeling that maybe this person is in trouble, or what if they are missing? That was a stupid thing to think. But who wouldn't have? There was a woman crying, and I asked, "Are you okay?" They didn't say anything for a couple of minutes, and then they said no. I turned off my phone, and the fact that I was uncomfortable standing up and checking to see if my door was locked didn't help. I was wondering what had caused that woman to frantically call someone, probably their parents, and accidentally call me. They didn't call me back, so I couldn't tell if they were okay. But since that call, everything has been quiet. No more scammers, etc. But I've been scared ever since. Story number 4. I believe my family and I saw an angel. The event took place more than 35 years ago, but I will do my best to remember everything and fill in the blanks where I am unsure. We were on a car trip from Alabama to Florida with our aunt in 1988. I was 5 years old and with my mother, brother, sister, father, and I. I think we had been on the road for about 3 to 4 hours when my brother asked my dad where we were, and he said we were halfway there. The ride takes about 7 to 8 hours. My dad pulled into a gas station to fill up the tank and go into the 7-Eleven that was right next to the gas station so we could rest. In the car, everyone got out and went to the 7-Eleven. My dad waited by the door for me to get out. From a few feet away, my aunt yelled that she was going to the bathroom with my brother and sister. Right after I got out of the car, an older woman showed up. That's her right next to my dad. The woman wore a yellow dress and a yellow hat with some kind of flower on it. But these details are very fuzzy, so I can't say for sure. She wore light pink shoes and sunglasses. My dad jumped up and down in fear when he saw her and said, "Shit, you scared me." That woman didn't answer, But instead she looked at my mom and said, "She's going to die." "What? Who is going to die?" my mom asked with worry in her eyes. She then looked at me and said, "She is going to die." My dad didn't like what she said, so he told her to stop bothering us and get the fuck away. After that, she left for the parking lot. My mom was scared about what the woman said, but my dad told her she was crazy. When my aunt, sister, and brother got back to the car, they asked why we hadn't bought any snacks. My dad quickly made an excuse, and we were back on the road. We didn't talk about it or bring it up again the rest of the trip. When we got to Orlando, we went to see our cousins. It was our home for 5 days. Religion and the supernatural are important to my mom, and she believes in them both. The words the woman had said would not leave her mind. She got really scared and went to an Orlando hospital to check on me. He did some tests and then told my mom, "It's great that you brought your daughter in. We found 2 blood clots in her left leg. The doctors didn't think I needed surgery, so they gave me medicine to thin my blood instead. And it got rid of both of them." I was checked out and sent home after a week in the hospital. They stopped at the same gas station on their way home and asked the manager if there were security cams around the property. They said yes, and my parents begged to see the video. After asking to see the video for a while, they finally gave in. When my mom tells me this next part, she wrinkles her brow and looks at me funny. The manager played back the security video to the exact time and date that we went to the gas station. On the security video, my parents' car pulled up and parked right in front of the camera. My aunt and brother are running out of the car to go to the bathroom. You can see my mom, dad, and me, but not a woman. The video didn't show the woman. It looks like my parents were talking to air because you can see them talking to nothing, as if there were no women there. They saw a woman, and my mom is sure they did. They both know it wasn't a dream, since they both saw her. But my dad thinks it was all a crazy accident and that the woman wasn't seen on the video because of a technical problem. My mom is sure it was an angel or something else from another world trying to save me. But the fact that a woman told me I was going to die and then I actually did must be a very, very strange coincidence since she wasn't caught on camera, but I don't know. Whether it was an angel or not, I will never know. But it's crazy to think that I would probably be dead if my parents hadn't met the woman and taken me to the hospital for a checkup. Story number 5. A school friend of mine once said they would kill me in my sleep. In my life, I haven't had too many things that I would call scary. I really don't have a very exciting or interesting life. I was pretty scared as a child for a long time, though, because of something that happened with a friend from school. This is a story about a girl named Jess. I'm not going to give out their real names. I went to school with Jess from elementary school through middle school for a while. We weren't friends, but I knew her and would gladly talk to her at any time. She always looked very strange when she was around other people. She was always pretty and kept to herself. It may sound strange, but she had an almost spiritual quality to her. She always spoke softly and had blue eyes and hair that was completely white, like a princess. Anyway, I would sometimes talk to her, but not much else for a while. You know, the normal way things work when you're in elementary school and make friends with someone. While I was at our neighborhood park on the weekend, she and her little brother showed up, which was a pleasant treat. We played the normal park games, caught up, and had a good time in general. We played hide and seek in the end. If I remember correctly, I was the one who had to find them. We found her at the top of the slide after I found her little brother. There used to be a big frog slide in the park in our town. You could sit on a platform at the top and go down 3 different slides. We found her. When we caught her going down the other end of the ladder after running up it, her tone changed totally. She looked very serious and unsettling, which was very different from how she was acting before. "I'm going to kill you," she told me without giving me any notice. Seeing her suddenly change her mind and make a threat against me scared me and made me feel like I had done something terrible. I ran into the park and hid somewhere for what seemed like 30 minutes. She finally faced me and told me the truth soon enough. She said she was sorry and told me what she had been hiding from me. I found out that she was actually a vampire. Yeah, I'm not making this up. She told me straight out that she was a vampire and was keeping it a secret from everyone so she wouldn't reveal the truth. Now is the time for me to talk about something important about this girl. During the whole time I knew her, she was sure she was a vampire. At this point, I still don't think this was some kind of prank on people for fun. The truth was finally told to one of my close friends, and she told them disturbing details about what she didn't do at night. She also made sure I never told anyone. There, on that swing at the park that night, she told me straight out that her powers let her see everything I did, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. She also threatened to kill me if I told anyone, like my friends, teachers, or even my parents. While I was a child, I was so trusting that I couldn't tell the difference between what was real and what wasn't. So, as far as I knew, she was really threatening me. When I left that park, I had this thought in my head that she gave me, and it really affected me. I didn't tell anyone about it for years, even after she graduated. Several times in my life, I really couldn't make up my mind. I was torn between telling my mom and not telling her because I was afraid of what she would do to me either way. After many years, I finally understood that it wasn't real, but I will never forget the years I lived with that fear in the back of my mind. Even the people I'm close to now agree with me that she was a strange person and really put off people. I know I looked stupid back then for really believing it, but I really did act in the most true way I could. The threat to kill you in your sleep may not have been true, but the thought of someone doing that is just plain weird. No matter where she is, I hope Jess is doing well and that she got over this phase she seemed to be going through for a while. Story number 6. Strange story from a long time ago. Even though it happened years ago, I remember it like it was yesterday. I don't believe in ghosts or anything, and I'm sure there's a sensible reason for this, but it still scares me LMAO. My husband works out of town and used to spend the whole week away from the family. When he was gone, we would all take turns having sleepovers, and this time it was my turn to have one in my mom's bedroom, which always scared everyone. No, really. That's where the ghost is if there was ever a ghost in the house. I won't go into all the crazy stuff that happens in that room because that's not the point of the post. Just know that the bedroom is weird. You can always hear things moving around in there, scratching and banging at the door, and the lights in the bathroom and closet flickering, weird things. Anyhow, everyone was pretty scared at the time and never wanted to be alone in there. My mom told me she was going to smoke a cigarette outside during the sleepover, and she asked me if I wanted to leave the light on until she came back. Of course, I agreed. After she leaves, I stay in the room for a while and try not to freak out when the lights go out and I feel someone get into the bed next to me. I spoke a stupid phrase like, "Hi," or "Welcome back," because I thought it was my mom. My mom started rubbing my back, and her hands felt cold, but she had just been smoking outside, so they would be. Anyhow, it started to be really painful and hurt when she kept rubbing and scratching my back. It wasn't just a normal back rub or back scratching. She was actually hurting me. She didn't stop at first when I told her to, but when I asked her again, it went back to being a nice back rub. As you might have guessed, though, it wasn't my mom after all. When she walked in, she said, "I thought you wanted the light on." I told her, "Yes, I did. But you came back a few minutes ago, remember?" She replied, "No, I just came back inside right now." I was confused and a little scared, so I finally rolled over to look at her. She was just getting into bed, and I asked her again if she was sure she was just now coming in. And she said, "Yeah, I just finished smoking." I thought that was strange because then who was hurting my back, lol. I thought I might have been dreaming, so I asked my mom to shine the flashlight on my back because it felt itchy. When she did, she saw that it was red and scratched up, and she made fun of how flexible I was. Story number 7. The phone call. I grew up in a very small town in India. I am Bengali, and ghost stories are a big part of our literature and society there. As kids, we read stories about nice ghosts and other creatures. As you get older, you read books with more serious themes. You can also just type ghosts in Bengali community into Google to get a list of them. In addition, we have a holiday called Bhut Chaturdashi that is a lot like Halloween in the United States. As a child, I wasn't really scared of those kinds of things, but I was very interested in them. This is the tale of a critter like that, a nishi. That's what my grandfather thinks it was. I'm going to tell the story for my grandfather because he always told me stories about other people's lives. But this one is his own. In the early 1950s, my grandfather used to live in a temple. The village was very small and far away, right on the border between Bangladesh and India. Up until the late 1930s, People would sacrifice human and goat heads in that temple as part of a rite. In the dark lanes, he has seen shadowy forms that look like people and goats. This happened many times when he had to get home late from work. That sounds creepy, doesn't it? But one night, things went wrong for him. It was rainy season, which is when the most anticipated freshwater fish of the year, the hilsa, comes out. My grandfather liked to fish after the sun went down. In that close lake, he said the fish were calmer when it got dark. No one got that reasoning, but I think he was just trying to escape being bothered by other fishermen. He wasn't sure, but he thinks he was fishing around 8:30 p.m. It was a very small town right on the border, and 8:30 p.m. felt like after midnight there. He was having a great time fishing when he caught a big hilsa with lots of eggs in its guts. The lake was across the street from that temple and a 10-minute walk from his house. He finally heard my grandmother calling him from behind in the dark, which is not something she does often. After a long day at work, he went fishing here while everyone else was asleep. He had already eaten dinner. He didn't want anyone to bother him. He told my grandmother that right before he left the house. He yelled, "What is it, woman?" but didn't look back because he was focused on his fishing net. She didn't answer. "What?" he yelled again after a short time. There was no answer. That late at night, she never went outside by herself. She always talked about how the village felt after 6 o'clock. In the summer, it seemed like everyone was dead inside their homes. Even the animals were quieter, and not a single leaf moved. It seemed like the town had a terrible event every night and everyone died of a plague. He knew it might be important right away. As he was getting ready to leave, he started packing his things when he heard his name called again in the dark, empty space. He asked himself, why doesn't she just go to the lake? He answered the sounds, "Don't wander around in the dark, dear. Go home. I am following you, following you, following you, following you." A voice laughed out of the darkness. The words sounded deeper than normal, like they were a mix of male and female voices. At that very moment, he realized that what he was doing was terrible. "Dear, following you, dear, following you." This time, the voice got deeper and more like my grandfather's. He stood in front of an old light that burned kerosene oil and kept the area shining. Besides that, he had extra kerosene in a different bottle, but he was too scared to move or scream. The fish were getting loose from the net and moving around on the ground while he stood there still. Then he heard scary laughs and cries, his wife's voice calling, and his own voice copying him like a parrot. All of this happened in the dark, from nowhere that anyone knew of. This went on for a few minutes, and then he heard the sound of his wife calling again. But this time she was crying. "Love me. Come to me. I don't have much time left. Love me. Come to me. I don't have much time left." Since the lantern's light was going out, the voices got closer. After what happened, all he can remember is waking up in his bed the next morning to find a lot of his neighbors in his front yard. And my grandmother was so worried she was crying a lot. His fever stayed high for 2 weeks after that event, and he never went outside after 6 p.m. After my dad was born a year later, my grandparents never came back to the village. Story number 8. It looked like my mom. I grew up with a selfish mother who ignored me a lot when I was in my early teens. I was micromanaged, and my dad wasn't there for me personally. Being a 27F now, I understand my mom because I saw how bad and mean my dad was to her. It was the summer of the mid-2000s. My 4-year-old brother woke me up from the longest nap ever in the afternoon. Those naps where you forget what day it is and what time it is. Even though I was mad, I knew he needed to get his milk. My mom went to check on my grandmother who had just had surgery. His food is always ready by my mom. I only had to warm it up and give it to him. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen after a few more minutes. She was there, getting his food ready. At first, I felt bad because I knew I was meant to do it and she had to leave Grandma to go back early. But something wasn't right. I noticed that she was putting all of the baby formula into one meal and moving so quickly, as if she was in a hurry. But I also remembered that she had already made the food before she left. I was really confused because my brain was still getting used to the short nap. I said, "When did you come back and why did you not wake me up?" She looked at me with a very angry face. Even though I'm used to her temper tantrums, this was the first time I saw this face. Why is she so mad? I can't quite put my finger on it, but her face wasn't the normal shape. Maybe the nose, the jaw, or the place where the eyes are. It was either too big or too small. I told them, "Let me help you." She didn't answer, but instead she shook the bottle so hard that the milk splashed all over the place. Her body was still, and she looked at me without blinking. At first glance, her face seemed strange to me, especially the way her eyes were placed. I remember my heart beating so fast after that I could almost hear it. I ran after my brother from the living room. There was a huge front yard with a rental unit for a family in another part of the house. The woman there was happy for us to stay until our mom got back. From their home phone, I called my mom and asked when she was coming back. When she got back after 2 hours, I got in a lot of trouble because the kitchen was a mess. I still don't know if it was because my brain was tired or because my mother had hurt me so much that I couldn't see that it was making up stories. I might have messed up the kitchen. When things went wrong at our house, I was always made to feel guilty, so maybe I was trying to deal with it so I wouldn't feel guilty. Story number 9. That thing had heavy breathing. When I was 15, I got my first smartphone in 2015 or 2016. I was always on it, which made my mom very mad. Around 1 a.m. one cold winter night, I was still on my phone, looking through Facebook while wrapped in a blanket from head to toe to avoid getting caught by my mom. She would sometimes check on me, so I couldn't lock my door. After about 10 to 15 minutes, I hear soft footsteps coming from the other room. I went crazy because I thought it was my mom. I quickly put my phone down and claimed to be asleep. I didn't poke my head out from under the blanket, though, because she was smart enough to tell that I wasn't really asleep. It sounded like the footsteps stopped at the doorway but didn't go inside. Then there was the sound of breathing, almost like someone was panting because they took the stairs instead of the lift to the 6th floor. The sensible part of me thought it was my mom being very mad because she thought I wasn't sleeping. I remember that she was very angry a lot of the time, and I was scared of her when she did. But why would she stand there and breathe for 2 minutes in the middle of the night instead of talking to me? I finally poked my head out from under the thick blanket after what seemed like forever and a half, because I couldn't stand the strangely loud breathing any longer. No one was there. There wasn't even the sound of someone walking away. There was heavy snoring coming from my mom's room when I went there. Then it dawned on me that she has been taking sleeping pills lately. That night, my mom and I were the only ones in our house. Story number 10. Why I'll never again visit a scary place. Yes, I know it's my second time telling you about a bad situation. I'm just a really bad luck person. Anyway, a lot of the fun things to do in my town shut down, which made me remember the scary thing that happened to me as a child. It was late October 2016, the night before Halloween. This took place when I was 8 years old. As a child, I was always loud, hyper, and nervous. One night at dinner, my mom told me about a haunted maze and asked if I wanted to go with 2 of my best friends for Halloween. Of course I said yes, because who wouldn't want to go with 2 of their best friends? Anyway, my parents and I picked up Darian and Jace, who were my best friends at the time. Like me, Darian was hyper and loud. Jace, on the other hand, was quiet but not too quiet. Anyway, when we got to the site, I think it was a building with a big maze and some woods behind it. I think admission was a fee. For some reason, we didn't want to break up right away. As we walked through the maze, there were of course the little jump scare animatronics and other things. Then there was this guy wearing normal clothes but a scream mask. He jumped out from behind a bush and scared both Darian and me. Remember that Jace and my mom went to one side, and Darian and I went to the other. Of course, we almost shit ourselves when he scared us. After a short time, the man started talking normally again. "Hey kids, I'm sorry I scared you. I have candy in the back. Do you want some?" Of course, we learned about how to stay safe around strangers, so I told him no. That didn't bother him, though. He kept pleading and even got angry. He left after we told him to. Darian began to cry, but I quickly put him to sleep. It had been an hour, and we were getting close to the trees when I saw the same guy from before start walking behind us and following us. Before he could fully run towards us, we started walking faster. Of course we were faster than him. He looked like he was 50. That's when Darian got scared and ran the other way. I was asking for Darian by myself now. Wow, I was really scared. At that very moment, someone grabbed me and someone else said, "Grab him! Grab him!" I was able to get the arm off of me, and as I ran away, I heard a gunshot hit one of the walls. I went back to the main door and saw my whole group making a report for me about something I had missed. While the cops were calling, I told them everything. It turned out that there wasn't a man working there with a scream mask after all. The cops also found a lot of rifles and other weapons in the woods. Scares me to talk about this one. Story number 11. It's getting late. So one night my best friend and I had a sleepover at her house. We were about 14 years old at the time, and we did this all the time. We were pretty bored, so we chose to walk to Dollar General to get some snacks for the night. It was around 9 p.m. Behind her house, there was a quick way to get to the Dollar General that went through a church parking lot and along a small path. We go to Dollar General and buy all the snacks we need. We go back the way we came. It's really dark outside, so as soon as we hit the path, my friend turns on the flashlight on her phone. It's a short path that doesn't take long to get back to the church parking lot. So we're walking and trying to make a right turn when we run into an older Hispanic man who gives us the 1,000-yard stare. My friend screams and quickly apologizes, but the man doesn't move. He keeps the same look on his face and doesn't say anything. He's standing there in the dark with nothing to do, so we keep walking through the church parking lot. My friend doesn't seem to care, but I keep my eyes on the spot where we saw him while she walks forwards and I walk backwards. As we walk and talk, I still can't get rid of the feeling. Then, about halfway through the parking lot, I see 6 guys running straight at us from the dark. We were lucky to be a little ahead, so I yelled at her to hurry up and inform her that they were coming. She did, and we started running. I don't know why we didn't just run the rest of the way to her house, but we chose to hide behind an air conditioner behind the church. Soon after, we heard them run by, yelling in Spanish so we couldn't understand what they were saying. Soon after, we got the courage to run the rest of the way back to her house, and when we got there, we saw them running behind the fence. They didn't see us or know where we were, but it scares me to think about what they were doing when we saw that man. Were they just spying on us from behind the bushes? What would happen if they didn't give us a head start and attacked us instead? What if they tracked us down before we could get away? That could have gone so many ways. Even now, thinking about what they really meant gives me chills. Story number 12. How my friend and I found something very upsetting. This story takes place in March 2019. My friend, whom I'll call Alex to protect his privacy, asked me to spend a night or two at his house. My parents and I fell to the ground. They didn't really kick me out, we just fought a lot and never got along. I thought I would just walk since it would only take me 15 minutes since I knew my parents wouldn't take me. Anyway, let's skip the boring parts and get to the weird ones. Alex and I were playing Grand Theft Auto 5 in his basement when we heard a scream that sounded like a woman outside. I and Alex both froze. Alex told me we should go into the trees in the morning because there was an abandoned house there. As kids, we were only 11, so I was scared, but I agreed anyway. Before going to sleep, I thought I kept hearing something tap on the window, like someone was tapping something on it. Alex and I got up and went through a small opening that led into the woods. Alex climbed through a broken window to show me the empty building. Right away, I could smell something awful coming from upstairs. Alex saw it too, but he told us to keep our mouths shut and keep looking. When we got to the upstairs, Alex was really excited about what we were going to do, but I was really scared. Alex was interested in going to the room where the smell was coming from. When Alex opened the door, he saw that the smell was coming from the closet. I asked him not to go in, but all he said was, "Stop being a pussy and come on." My heart stopped when he opened that door. In that closet, there was a dead body, 3 broken beer bottles, and shirts and socks that looked dirty. We ran out of those trees faster than I've ever run out of them before. We called the cops even though we knew we would probably get in trouble for breaking and entering. But now it doesn't matter. A search team and some other people I don't remember came with the cops. But I'll be sure to have a story to tell my children one day.